A 90s kid grabs the ringing phone without a second thought. Beside them, a Gen Z freezes, staring at it like it's a live grenade, waiting for it to stop. Same phone, same room, two completely different nervous systems. If you've ever sat across from someone 10 years older or younger than you and felt like you were speaking two different languages, like no matter how hard you both tried, something just refused to translate, this video is going to explain exactly why. Because 90s kids and Gen Z aren't just separated by age. They were raised by two completely different worlds, and those worlds wired their brains in ways that make truly understanding each other almost impossible. Welcome back. Today we're decoding the psychology of why these two generations will never fully get each other, and why almost everyone blames the wrong thing for it. First, drop the most common myth, that one generation is just better, smarter, tougher, or lazier than the other. It isn't. The real answer is colder and more interesting. Your brain isn't born finished. It's sculpted by the world it enters. During childhood and adolescence, your brain moves through what scientists call sensitive periods, windows where it wires its baseline settings around the environment surrounding it. Whatever is normal for you between roughly the ages of 8 and 18 doesn't just feel normal. It becomes the default your brain measures everything else against for the rest of your life. So, a 90s kid's brain set its defaults in one world. A Gen Z brain set its defaults in a completely different one. And once those defaults lock in, they're almost impossible to feel your way out of. You're not choosing to see the world your way. Your wiring is. Let me show you the 3 places where that wiring splits the hardest. The first is patience, and it causes the most contempt in both directions. If you were a 90s kid, your entire childhood was built on waiting. You waited a week for photos to come back. You sat by the radio with your finger on the record button just to catch one song. You waited for your show to come on at a set time, and if you missed it, it was gone. Waiting wasn't a frustration, it was just the texture of being alive. A Gen Z brain developed in the opposite universe. Every song, every show, every answer, every person, available instantly, on demand, the second the want appears. That's not a moral failing, it's conditioning. When reward is always one tap away, the brain's patience circuitry never gets the years of training scarcity forced on the older generation. So, when a 90s kid watches a Gen Z get antsy waiting 90 seconds for anything, they read it as entitlement. And when a Gen Z watches a 90s kid tolerate slow, clunky, inconvenient things, they read it as weirdly passive. Neither is right. They were trained on two different machines. But patience is the small one. The next difference goes all the way down to how each generation sees themselves. If you grew up in the 90s, you got something Gen Z has never once experienced. The freedom to be embarrassing with no evidence. You could have a terrible haircut, say something stupid, fall flat on your face, and the moment simply dissolved. There was no record, no audience. Your most awkward years existed only in the unreliable memories of the people who were there. You got to figure out who you were in private. Gen Z never had that. They came of age with a camera in every hand and an audience attached to every moment. Anything could be captured, posted, screenshotted, and replayed forever. So their brains adapted the only way they could, by developing a constant, low-level awareness of being watched. Psychologists describe a version of this as the imagined audience, the feeling that your life is always being observed, so you'd better manage how it looks. This is why so much about each generation baffles the other. The older one sees Gen Z's careful self-curation and calls it fake or attention-seeking. Gen Z sees the older generation's "just be yourself, who cares" attitude as a luxury they were never handed. Both are reacting honestly to two completely different relationships with being seen. And that leads straight into the difference that causes the most day-to-day friction of all, how they actually talk to each other. Go back to that ringing phone from the start. Now you understand it. A 90s kid was raised on synchronous communication, live, direct, in real time. You called the house and risked the dad answering. You knocked on the door, not knowing if anyone was home. Communication meant putting yourself on the line, right now, with no edit button. So directness became normal. comfortable even. Gen Z was raised on the exact opposite: asynchronous, editable, deniable. A text you can draft and redraft. A message you can leave unread. A call you can decline and replace with a voice note on your own schedule. When that's your native language, a sudden, unscheduled phone call doesn't feel convenient. It feels like an ambush, someone demanding a live, unedited version of you with no warning. So the 90s kid thinks the Gen Z is avoidant and can't communicate. The Gen Z thinks the 90s kid is aggressive and has no boundaries. Same conversation, two nervous systems reading it through completely different rules. And here's the uncomfortable part. The thing almost nobody on either side wants to admit. Both generations secretly believe the other one is broken. The 90s kid looks at Gen Z and sees anxiety, short attention, and fragility. The Gen Z looks at the 90s kid and sees burnout, denial, and a refusal to evolve. Each one is quietly convinced that they are the normal one, and the other is the defective version. But neither is broken. That's the whole point. Each generation is a near-perfect adaptation to the world that built it. Gen Z's caution makes complete sense in a world where everything is permanent and public. The 90s kid's bluntness made complete sense in a world that demanded it. You're not looking at one healthy generation and one damaged one. You're looking at two different survival strategies for two different environments. And the reason you can't just get over the gap is the part we started with. Your own defaults are invisible to you. To your brain, your normal isn't one option among many. It's reality itself. That's why the misunderstanding runs so deep. You're not disagreeing about the world. You're each living in the leftover wiring of a different one. So, what do you actually do with this? You stop trying to convert each other. The goal was never to make the Gen Z more patient or the 90s kid more online. The goal is translation. When you catch yourself thinking the other generation is being ridiculous, the more accurate thought is almost always, their normal was set by a different world than mine. And if you really want to use this, trade. The 90s kid knows things Gen Z is starving for: how to be bored, how to be present, how to sit in a slow moment without reaching for a screen. And Gen Z knows things the older generation struggles with: how to set a boundary without guilt, how to question rules that never deserved respect, how to protect your own energy. Neither is the finished version of a human being. They're each holding half of something. The two generations will probably never fully understand each other, but that was never really the assignment. The assignment was to stop mistaking different from me for wrong. If you saw your own generation in this, or the one that drives you up the wall, I want to hear it. 90s kids, defend yourselves in the comments. Gen Z, tell me exactly where I got you wrong. I'll be reading both sides, and trust me, the comment section on this one is going to be a war worth watching. If this gave you a new way to see that person you keep clashing with, hit subscribe so we can keep decoding the hidden wiring behind how we all think. Take care, and I'll see you next time.